Today on our 2015 Buick Enclave, we're going to take a look at and show you how to install the Airlift 1000 coil air helper springs for the rear. Part number is AL60816. Now here's what our airbags are going to look like installed. They're constructed of a durable polyurethane. It's going to hold up to the road salts, oils, grime, things like that we typically encounter. Now, these are designed to level out your vehicle once you have a heavy load in the back. By installing the airbags, this is going to give us about 1,000 pounds of support. That doesn't mean it increases the capacity of the vehicle by 1,000 pounds. It just reduces the strain on the rear suspension by 1,000 pounds. Now, that excess strain without the airbags, it eventually causes premature failure of the rear of the vehicle here. It's also going to change the driving characteristics of the vehicle because not only are we sagging in the back, but the front end comes up a little bit. That's going to take the weight off the front tires and reduces our steering and handling. It also makes our headlights point a little bit further up, which will decrease visibility, and it changes the alignment angle, causing excess tire wear. Now with our airbag inflated and re-leveling our vehicle, we're going to restore the handling and steering capabilities of the vehicle. We're getting our alignment angles back where they should be, so it's going to help to reduce tire wear, and it's also leveling out those headlight beams so we can see where we're headed. It's going to have an operating range of 5 to 35 psi. We always want to keep at least 5 pounds in them, and then when we need it, we can go up to 35 pounds to get the leveling capability. Now we can inflate our bag. We just place our black plastic cap on there to keep everything nice and clean. You can see here with our side-by-side GoPro that before the airbags are installed, it moves up and down quite a bit in relation to the lower part of the exhaust. As we do the slalom side to side, you'll see the expansion and contraction. As compared to the after with the airbags installed, you're going to have a lot less movement, which means we have more support here on the rear end, keeping our coil springs from compressing as much. Now to begin your installation, you want to follow the instructions so you can allow the rear tires to hang freely, and we'll get these taken off of both sides. For that we use a 7/8 socket. Now we're going to disconnect the sway bar end link here. It comes right down through the lower control arm. Use a little bit of spray lubricant there just to make sure it comes off nicely for us. We'll do that on both sides as well. Now it's likely that'll spin on you. You'll see right up here at the top below that upper bushing, there's going to be a flat spot there, and you'll be able to get on that with an open-end adjustable wrench. You're going to be pulling off the bottom half of that bushing, which are nuts attached to. We'll be putting that back in, so hang on to it. Next, if we come up the brake line, it comes into the back of the caliper. If we follow that up, there's going to be a bracket that holds that to the frame. We want to remove that. Just a single bolt. That's a 10 millimeter. Next, we'll remove the long bolt that holds the bottom part of our shock absorber. For this, we'll use a 21 millimeter. Now we're going to support our control arm here in the bottom with some jack stands. We'll remove the bolt here again with a 21 millimeter socket and wrench that holds our control arm to the knuckle, which is here behind the disc. Now we'll take out the bolt here on the front side of the knuckle, also connecting to the control arm there. Now we'll allow our control arm to come down, and we'll kind of rotate our spring assembly out. We're going to pull that plastic band off there for now. We'll put it back on when we're done. And we need to cut off part of the Jounce bumper here. We're going to be getting rid of this part, so we'll clamp to that. And we want to cut right at that seam just above the metal and below that rubber. Now this part we're not going to reuse. Now we'll do the same thing for the passenger side, and we also want to cut that Jounce bumper down. Now in the center of that perch here for the top of the spring, there's going to be a hole. We need to get this enlarged to about 3/4 of an inch. There's not a ton of room in here to get a drill and drill bit. So you can use a right angle drill with a 3/4 inch bit. We're going to use a step bit so we can just kind of step it up a little by little. You could also use a Dremel tool and just round it out until you get it to a 3/4 diameter. Now we're going to clean up that hole a little bit just to make sure we don't have any sharp edges. Our Airline is going to be running through there and we want to avoid any punctures. Now you'll just want to slide the airbag down to about midpoint on your spring. And the part we cut off, we said we were going to save. We're going to place that back up on top of the spring. Now on the bottom, there's going to be an indent, that lower portion, and that's where you want the end of the coil spring to sit. So this needs to sit up against that edge. And then it's very likely you'll need to pull down on that control arm to get it back in, just like we did when we had to take it out. Now once we know we have this in the correct position, the bottom of the spring, that end is going to be up against right here on that edge like we talked about. And then the remaining part of that jounce stop that we left, it's going to have that rub mark on it. You'll tell right where the end of the spring was, so just get that positioned in the same spot. When we get this put back together, everything's going to be the same. Now we want to run our Airline tubing to the top of our spring here. To do that, we need to go on top of where the spring mounts. Right on the front edge of this plate, there's a little tiny hole. So our Airline tubing is going to go in there, and we want to direct it so that it comes out above that hole, and we want to bring that down through. And with a little screwdriver or a little pick, just kind of bend it down toward that hole as you work it through. Kind of like that. Now we've got our little clamp. We want to slide that on. We need to slide the end of our tube down on the top of that barbed fitting. We want it on there so that it's completely covering the barbs. And then we'll bring our clamp down just like that. Now we're going to slide that airbag up like that. We'll start raising our control arm up. Now the knuckle, in our case, it kind of came back a little bit. So we're going to push that forward to allow it to go in between the gap that we've got here in our control arm. Now as we bring this up, we want to have our, if your bushing came off your sway bar link, have that back on there. And then just keep working everything around so we can get it lined up. Now as you put the bolt back through, in typical situations there's going to be a washer that fits right in here that falls out. When you separate this from this washer is going to come out. You want to get that put back in the correct position. Now we need to bring our airbag up so it sits flush on that part that we left. And we just need to check and make sure we're not going to have any interference between the stem of the airbag, the boss around it, and that pocket. And it looks like we've got plenty of room there. Now you'll want to raise our control arm up. We want to take, if you're using a set of jack stands, you want to take just a little bit of weight off of that jack stand. We're going to get this bolt tightened down to the torque specifications listed in the instructions. Now we'll do the same for our forward control arm bolt. Now you might have to lower your control arm a little bit at this point, but we're going to get our shock bolt put back in. Get it tightened down. Now we can get our sway bar nut put back in place there. And as it goes in, we want that little collar here on the top to seat inside of that hole. So the last thing we'll have to take care of here is going to be getting our bolt back in our brake line bracket. Now we're going to run our Airline down kind of along with the brake line that comes out over kind of towards the middle of the vehicle at that crossmember. Now as we run this, we need to avoid any sharp edges, any significant sources of heat or anything like that, or anything that might cause damage to our Airline. Now we'll use a couple of the provided zip ties, and we're going to get our Airline anchored out there properly so we don't have to worry about it moving around or rubbing on anything. So we'll go right there to the top of that brake line. We'll come down underneath here and go to the brake line again. Now right on top of the crossmember here, we're going to have another wire loom. As we get this zip tied off to that, and right up there is where we're going to be placing our T. Now I'm going to trim my Airline here. I'm going to be installing the small T that came with the kit. That guy there. And I'm going to do it down a little bit. What I'm going to do is make my T down here so I can get to it. And then when I run my Airline back, I'm going to draw it back towards the rear of the vehicle a little bit there. So we won't have any slack, but we'll still be able to get our hands in here and work. We're going to use a tubing cutter. This is part number AL10530. We get that cut off nice and cleanly. We're going to slide one of our hose clamps up on there. We're going to slide our T in, and we want to get it in there far enough so it covers up those barbs. And once we've got that slid in, we'll bring down our clamp so that it goes over our barbs. Now we're going to head over to the passenger side. We'll repeat the exact same process for rebuilding that, and we want to slide that Airline on this side of the T. And once we have everything buttoned back up on the passenger side there, we ran our Airline over to our T. We want to connect the remaining Airline we have to the other side of the T. Once we get that in, we'll slide our clamp up on that. Now I'm going to route our Airline back toward the rear of the vehicle. Now up here where we have our T, I'm going to use a longer zip tie than what came with our kit. And I want to zip tie that right up to the body. Then again with the longer zip tie here where we come through this bracket, I'm going to zip tie it up as high as I can get it. And this is going to help us to make sure that we're not resting down on that sway bar with our Airline. We want to make sure that we've got a gap there. The sway bar is this black round bar. Now I'm going to run the Airline right along with my wiring there. If your vehicle for some reason doesn't have a hitch or wiring, you can go in behind the fascia. There's a couple of holders there. We're going to be using the bottom bolt hole here on our wiring bracket, just so we don't have to add too much to the car or really change the cosmetics of it. And to do that, we're going to drill out a 5/16 hole. So we're going to remove the existing screw there. We'll drill right through the plastic and the bracket itself. Now we'll determine about how much Airline we're going to need. We'll get that trimmed off. We'll slide our last clamp up and on. We can slide in our Schrader valve. Bring our clamp down to secure it. And we can thread on our nut. And we'll set the depth of this with our nut. That's going to, the further in it goes, the more of our valve we'll have sticking out. Place on our lock washer. We're going to bring that through our hole. Once that comes through, rubber washer will go on. We'll put on a flat washer. And then our nut. And we can use a 1/2 inch socket or wrench, get that tightened down, and cap it off. That'll make it look pretty nice. Now let's pressurize the system. We'll put about 25 pounds of air in it, and we're going to spray down each of our connections to make sure we don't have any leaks. Now to check for leaks, we're just going to use some soapy water. Spray it up on there, let it sit a few minutes, and as long as you don't see little bubbles forming, we'll be in good shape. Now with no leaks detected, we can put our tires back on and torque down our lug nuts properly, and we'll be ready to hit the road. And that's going to complete our installation of the Airlift 1000 rear coil air helper springs, part number AL60816 on our 2015 Buick.
Thanks for watching. Click the link in our description below to shop, learn more, or visit us at eTrailer.com. And leave us a comment if you have any questions.